Florida. You're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gornoski. So glad to be back with you live for another journey through the news, headlines of our time, and we're going to have a great time doing it, rolling up our sleeves to solve problems neighbor to neighbor. That's what we're here for. This is a breath of fresh air, in my opinion, when we can build a community together, thinking through the issues that we face without all the toxic groupthink that we collect from the corporate press. So sick of it, so tired of it. But we don't have to stay sick. We can heal ourselves every day and get back to building civilization. Civilization is about, ultimately, if you think about it, it's about a couple things. It's about being able to maintain a sense of differentiation and boundaries. People have to be able to express themselves. They have to be able to feel as if they are themselves, that they haven't lost themselves. You know, people, when you play the game, you know, monkey see, monkey do, you know, when you start copycatting people. There's the old children's game kids play where they say everything you say, right? And it's fun, and you can try to endure it for a time, but eventually it makes you feel like, good grief, can you please stop, right? There's something absolutely annoying about perfect imitation that doesn't stop, right? And so humans need to feel like they are distinct from others, that they have their own sense of self, and this is my property, and this is my type of style, and this is my haircut, this is my belief system, these are my friends, this is my community, this is my expression. This is my identity. That's a big word you hear a lot today. And civilization is about maintaining that sense of self, staving off chaotic violence. Because if you have chaotic violence, you certainly don't have any place for civilization. People have to learn to get along, right? They have to learn to turn their swords into plowshares, right? To lay down the use of aggression and force and put it down and say, you know what, let's learn to work together. Let's not be in hyper competition and winner takes all mindset. Let's learn to be cooperative, right? That's what civilization's about. And in order to have that, we have to have a story that binds us together. We have to have a story that we tell ourselves that gives us a sense of differentiation, that gives us a sense of agency and determination in life, and that gives us a sense of where we are going in history, who we are, why we're here, the big questions. Unfortunately, so many of the people who end up doing wicked things like mass shootings and stuff are often wrestling with these questions. Who am I? Why are we here? What does it mean to be human? And they spiral into nihilism because of how much we have disavowed the emphasis of civilization, right? We have disavowed the idea of a transcendent story that we all get to be a part of. We have disavowed the notion of differentiation, that there are differences and boundaries of self that we should respect and maintain and pass down generation to generation. And we've also disavowed the notion that violence is something that should be taboo, that should be contained. We cheapen violence. We watch horrible movies where they have violence, and we're desensitized to it slowly but surely through the decades. And we talk about perpetual wars. We hear about drone strikes. We hear about, you know, all kinds of different things blowing up here, there, everywhere, and we desensitize to it. Then we hear about shootings and terrible things, and it desensitizes people Then we hear about gang violence. We hear about brokenness. We hear about the massive prison population. We hear about the violence that's talked about in a hush-hush way that happens in prison for many people who are nonviolent, victimless people who've never laid a hair on somebody else, never laid a finger on somebody else's, hair or whatever, right? And so we don't really want to face what it means to build civilization, maintain civilization, champion civilization. We need to have a story that binds us together. We need to have a sense of differentiation of who we are and distinctions between this is my stuff, that's your stuff. This is my family, that's your family. This is an adult, this is a child, right? These are different boundaries that we should have healthy respect for and pass on. I have this talent. I'm this size, you're that size, right? These are differences. We don't have to flatten everything out into this amalgamation of some kind of virtual reality world come to life. That's just a recipe for chaos. And with that chaos comes out of control rivalry, conflict, and ultimately violence, which we have cheapened and desensitized to. And so when I talk about these things, it's so important for us to understand why we have so many different manifestations of this very strict and very aggressive totalitarian vision that's seeping into life. Whether it's the obsession with racial tribalism, whether it's the obsession with gender identity tribalism, not just gender, but, we have the otherkins that identify as a reptile, identify as a dog, identify as a rock, identify as, whatever, Falcor from the Never-Ending Story, whatever it is. And with that, we have lost, again, the ingredients for building civilization. We got here because we had the civic religion of the American flag. We had the civic religion of America that bound us together through many different tumultuous times in our past. Particularly after World War II, that was the founding moment of a new order in which America was basically the world's leader in terms of power and influence. And that's what we've been living through the waning stages of, this post-World War II era in which America became the leader of the governments of the world. And now that's starting to fray, and now that myth of inevitability, that myth of invincibility, and that myth of believability, that it will always maintain this binding civic religion, for whatever reason, we could get into it for days, but we won't here today, it's been fraying. And out of that disintegration of that unity we used to have, all of these new religions are popping up surrounding victim identities. They're popping up as schisms, breaking out of the American fabric and saying, no, it's this flag. No, it's that flag. No, it's this tribe. No, it's that symbol. No, it's this slogan. All these different things are schismatically popping out of our old civic religion, and we have to be able to deal with what this means. Back after this. Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Gornoski. Hope you're doing well. We're live on FM and AM and our website at neighborschoice.com. We've got a new interview with Steve Kirsch as part of our new series called The Science, which is available on its own exclusive RSS feed for all of our podcasts. It's also available as a video on Rumble and other platforms that we're on. And it has all the best leading scientists, thinkers, journalists who have got it right when it comes to this pandemic and what comes next. How do we prevent the disastrous lockdowns, the mass hysteria, mass formation? Speaking of which, we have my exclusive interview with Professor Matthias Desmet on neighborschoice.com and our Things Hidden podcast. I'm telling you, this is like a network in and of itself, our show, the different contents that we have been able to cultivate and develop from this core show, A Neighbor's Choice, you're listening to. So go to neighborschoice.com, put your email in to get our weekly update, and also check out the new interview with Steve Kirsch about vaccine injuries. Not allowed to talk about that because public health officials represent another sacred cow that, we are scientists. We elect these technocratic elites who have all this power of reason and quantification and measurement, and they're able to objectively determine what is the best thing. Just so happens that it's always going to be patented. It's never going to be something generic. That's kind of funny how that would work, right? If you're truly going to do scientific research, how does it always end in having to need a new patented drug? Isn't that convenient? The left used to critique that kind of hypocrisy and fake approach to science of corporatism, but we've lost a lot of that left temporarily. Hopefully they'll come back to their senses if possible. But I'm talking today in this opening monologue about a bigger picture thing that's driving this kind of rapidly nauseating change of culture in America, in which everybody is supposed to pick a tribal identity, and it's always a victim group, right? America's flag used to be the civic religion that bound us together. We had our differences, we had our problems, but we came together united by the flag. And then the wars happened over and over. Different wars started to happen that we didn't quite believe were needed or just. It didn't unite us together. Maybe there was, sold to us with some stretched truths, Gulf of Tonkin, so forth and so on. Maybe some things, Agent Orange, abuse of soldiers, abuse of different folks involved with the war when they come back, their families being harmed by the moral sufferings that the soldiers endure. Not adequate health care, not respect for the soldiers that come back, abuse of the public's trust, and hey, just one more year, just one more handout for giant corporations for us to be over in a far-off land. I'm talking about Vietnam, but I'm talking about many, many, many other wars. You have those different wars come over and over and over again, and people start to say, wait a second, this isn't like World War II. This feels like our trust in this flag symbol are being misused and abused. And this symbol is not standing for what it used to stand for. It's standing for the spread of Wilsonian globalism and war profiteering and racketeering and all this terrible stuff. And so that mythic veil, that mythic, hey, this is the religion that we can all get goosebumps around, people started to say, I don't know if I agree with that. And all of a sudden they start looking for a new tribal group to find, and then they start looking at different victims of the West and America's past, and they start saying, well, let's create an identity group that's exclusionary and says this group is the sacred victim group. So you had the feminist movement doing that. They looked at different ways in which women have been mistreated, and they said, hey, let's create a victim cult, a religion of political power that would be bound together by expressing concern for the victimization of women, and that will be a bludgeon that we will use for political power to coerce whatever we in our political group want. And so that's where we go with that. And then you get different racial identity groups that come along and say, hey, you know what? Our group has been disadvantaged. Our group has been systematically hurt and shut out. And so we're going to take that victim concern, that pain that people feel, because we're in a Christian society that's haunted by victimization and scapegoats. And so therefore it creates currency and power. And then that is cashed in for political coercive power and a seat at the table to use coercion. And on and on and on, different groups. And each of those groups become sacred in the minds of the people in it, and they continually have to have more and more schisms, breakaway groups out from that group, because they'll say, well, this isn't strong enough, we have to be the radicals, and this isn't strong enough, we need to have to break away from that group. It's kind of like how Protestant churches have, how many, 40,000 denominations, always a schism for this or that. We have to schism for this reason, we have to schism for that reason, we have to break away for that reason, this reason, that reason. And then it happens in the institutional churches as well. But this mindset that always having to break away and create a new group, and that new group kind of binds together by saying, aren't we glad that we're not those guys we broke away from? That's where we're at today. That's where we have identity politics. That's why have to have a kind of sacred core, which is this story about victims, which is interesting because Rene Girard, the anthropologist that we reference on this show from time to time, has said that humanity does not invent its gods, it deifies its victims. In the word religion, the root means to bind together. So here we have what? Deified victims that bind people together in a sense of shared transcendence. But within that group, there's constant infighting and rivalry and schism, and they have to always be on the hunt for a common scapegoat that binds the broader coalition of people who buy into the story of that split-off group. They have to always be on the hunt for scapegoats to kind of reinvigorate the cause for its members. And I see that as what we're dealing with today. And it will not stop until we understand that it doesn't go anywhere, that it won't create the sense of belonging and community and peace and restoration between pain and suffering that people experience. It will not bring forgiveness. It will not bring peace and shalom the way it promises. And we cannot make that otherwise. We can't change it. It's something written into reality itself. You will not have lasting peace by joining together in purging a common foe. As promising as it feels in the moment, as often as you will find gurus and charlatans and Pied Pipers who will tell you just this once, go believing that you will find transcendent relief and satisfaction in joining together and expelling this common enemy group. Every time it's tried, it doesn't create catharsis. It doesn't create resolution. It doesn't bring you deep and lasting peace, because Jesus destroyed that psychological possibility by disrupting that way of making peace. That's why when Jesus said he came to bring peace, but not as the world creates peace. Why? What does that mean? If you don't understand what I'm talking about anthropologically, it doesn't really make any sense. What does it mean? What is the world? I mean, if we just think of Jesus as just another deity to pick from in terms of some kind of big other in the sky that we pick and we say, okay, that team, it's that team, not Hercules, not Buddha, not that or whatever. If that's the way we think of Jesus, then what does it mean when he says, I've come to bring peace, but not the way the world does peace? What is that? We have to understand that the world used to make peace common enemy group to expel, to create internal peace and unity between people who are going to have rivalry and conflict. And the more we come to terms with that as the foundation of our culture, we'll be able to stop making the same mistakes. Because when Jesus said it's finished on the cross, he wasn't joking. He was finishing that scapegoat approach to society. He was finishing it so that we wouldn't be able to do it anymore. So that we would learn to get along with each other together without expelling a common enemy to get along. We'd have to learn to like each other without a common enemy. What a novel concept. Imagine if conservatives could get along without having a common enemy to constantly be in fear of and in rivalry to in order to have happiness and joy. Imagine if the left, God bless them, could have joy without having to hate Donald Trump and everything that they're told his supporters represent. Imagine if people in Hollywood could have joy without having to punch down on lower income Trump supporters by mocking the way they look, the way they speak, their hygiene, their teeth, whatever. Imagine if they could have true joy in relationship with one another without having to hurt somebody else socially or physically. That's the world Jesus had in mind, and we can all be a part of it right now. It's not pie in the sky. The only thing pie in the sky is that we can continue to do what we're doing and have any sense of sanity. Let's take a break. To A Neighbor's Choice Radio, and we are live on FM and AM, and we're also available on our website at aneighborschoice.com, where you can listen live from anywhere around the world as we bring you the news and analysis that you won't find anywhere else. Fox News is airing Tucker Carlson instead of the January 6th committee. Townhall.com reports. This is by Julio Rosas. It's cue the liberal tears. Fox News is not airing the hearing of January 6th committee live this Thursday, as it falls during the network's highly watched primetime lineup, and will instead be airing the hearing live on Fox Business. CNN host Brian Stelter criticized the decision to air Tucker Carlson because his show promotes conspiracy theories about the riot, calls the committee illegitimate, and ridicules the committee members. So, you look at these stories, they're trying so hard to create these sacred religious moments, to kind of construct a new civic religion that is a patchwork of these different victim cults that are very vicious and very aggressive and demonizing to anybody who is ostensibly supposed to be a member of the victim cult who doesn't think exactly like the victim cult tells them to think about. For example, you've got Black Americans who are not interested in Keynesianism as the victim cult tells them they must have in their mind. They're not interested in microwaved Marxism. They're not interested in microwaved Foucault. They're not interested in these things. And yet, they're told, if you don't submit your mind, if you don't submit your heart and at least your rhetoric and your tongue to those different prophets of what it means to be politically black in America, then they will viciously hurt you, demonize you, expel you, go after you, attack your intelligence, attack your identity, attack your legitimacy, threaten you, bully you, psychologically try to torment you. And they do so with total moral righteousness. Because when you are a part of a scapegoating mob, you don't believe that you are mistaken in your anger. You believe with all righteous indignation that you are truly right to persecute the person you're persecuting. And this groupthink has a kind of magnetic power that just binds up your mind to this collectivist hive energy that's almost impossible to pull out of when you get entrenched to a certain level. And that's what we're dealing with every single day. You see this with every community. There are people, you're supposed to be, and it happens on the right as well, right? If you don't submit to certain policy, dogmas, you're considered anathema. And you'll be expelled from power opportunities and status opportunities or whatever it is that they can dangle in front of you to get you to submit to the groupthink. But the leftist establishment is the hegemony of our time because it more effectively imitates the victim concern that Christianity puts in our conscience. The right tends to have an aesthetic that is more about tradition and, order in a way that ends up making it look a little bit less subversive compared to the left. But we must understand that just because the left has the power right now doesn't mean that the right, therefore, is right on all of its things. We are supposed to, in my opinion, if you call yourself a Christian, we're to imitate Jesus wherever that takes us. And where it takes us is the good life. Where it takes us is the beautiful life, the simple life. Where it takes us is the humility to be able to accept paradox rather than be trapped in dialectic. It reminds me of something that I see oftentimes. For example, it happened just recently. I talked about it yesterday on our live radio broadcast. I was reading the news with you all, and I saw that this story emerged about David Weigel being, suspended without pay because he shared a politically incorrect joke. And then I looked at who he had shared it from, and it was this guy named Cam, who I was just on his show. He has a podcast, and I had just been on his show a few days before, and I had talked to them about scapegoating and how society creates order by finding a common enemy and how Jesus destroys that, right? This is what I talked to you about in different ways. And I just went on their show to explain that. It's called The Mad Ones. And then he had, just after that, I guess he had posted this joke where he said, all women are they're either bipolar or bisexual, right? And David Weigel of the Washington Post retweeted that, and he got suspended without pay. And I was pointing out, look, the left cares more about words than they care about real violence. They don't ever suspend any Washington Post reporters who lie us into war and lie us into terrible sanctions that starve children around the world. There never is any consequence for that. That's okay. And that goes back to the mantra I've talked about before that defines the McWoke left, which is bombs and drones may break children's bones around the world, but words forever hurt me, right? Words are what really is what they use. They use word games to play power games and to denigrate the importance of the body and taking care of preventing violence and building peace. And so, this story, though, it kind of reminded me of something because I started to see with Cam, he had posted that joke, and then all of a sudden, I saw a lot of folks on the conservative Twitter world, something that I'm new to because, there's a certain way of tweeting, there's a certain way of talking when you want to imitate the native way of speaking on Twitter. I'm new to it, but I've been observing it for years. But they all the right on cue started saying that joke, about the bias thing, right? About women. And they all started posting it. And I thought to myself, it just reminds me of how the right has a way of being right in a way that still makes them completely wrong and useless, right, in the grand scheme of things. Because if all you're ever doing is reacting, if all you're ever doing is just saying what leftists tell you that you can't say, so they say, don't say that joke, we're banning David Weigel for a month without pay, and then the right says, okay, we're going to say it over and over and over again. Okay, well, you're making a point. Yeah, you could say you're exercising your free speech. Don't tell me what to do. I'll show you. Okay, yeah, there's a point there. It's a nice feeling when someone tries to be a school marm and police your thoughts. It's nice to be able to just exercise a little rebellious, I guess, but is that really where we need to go? Because if all you're doing is just saying what they tell you don't say, they're still driving what you are doing, right? If they wear pink and they tell you, you got to wear pink, don't you dare wear blue, and then you wear blue, are you really winning? Interesting. Something to think about. If you're still imitating your rival and they're setting the pace for what you're going to do and how fast you're going to do it, are you really leading? In reality, you're basically in the same posture of being a child in the back seat. So you may react with sass, but that's what kids do. And kids are not in power, okay? When an adult is driving, right, and he's driving the child to school or whatever, the kid could be as sassy as he wants. He can even mock what the parent says. He can even do the opposite of what the parent says. The parent says, be quiet, and the kid gets louder. But the parent's still driving the car. The kid's not allowed to drive. He's got no power, really, in that moment. He's still going to school, right? So that's where conservatives are when they're always reacting. It feels cool and edgy. I get it, compared to the Jeb Bush era of just being a total 100%, lemming for the same uniparty, corporate fascism. I get it. But is it really helping anything in the long run, or is it just making you solidified as the little kid in your little car seat, in the back seat, in the minivan, in the third row? Is that what the new right's all about? I don't know. Is that what Populist Inc.'s all about? Is that what Libertarian or Conservative Inc.'s all about? Is that what MAGA Inc.'s all about? I don't know. Let's hope not. Let's hope that new, true, visionary leadership can emerge in this time of reflection. Let's unpack this and some more headlines as we continue after this short message. Gornoski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice as we turn to the mind of Prince Charles. The NewAmerican.com has a story. It says, more climate insanity. Prince Charles wants cows to wear face masks. What's up with them and masks, these guys? Since just when you thought climate change fanatics had reached peak insanity, word comes that none other than the heir to the British throne is backing a plan that would have cows wear special face masks to combat methane emitted by rumination. A British startup company, Zelp, which designed the bovine mask, was recently awarded the Terra Carta Design Lab Award, founded in part by the Prince of Wales along with designer Joni Ive. The proposed bovine mask weighs approximately 100 grams and contains solar-powered fans intended to redirect methane emissions from cows chewing their cud into a chamber which chemically converts the methane into carbon dioxide and water vapor. The inventors believe that the mask should filter about 30% of the ruminant methane produced by cows and hope to reach 60% in future designs. So the device turns a minor greenhouse gas, methane, into other more potent greenhouse gases, CO2 and H2O, and that's supposed to help against global warming, the article says. Zelp was awarded 58,000 euros, and 58,000 euro cash prize for producing the new device. And the device is expected to cost livestock owners about $44 per cow per year. So you look at that and you say, goodness, why do they never just want to go back to what actually does work, but would disrupt the big business-owned oligarchic food system? Why? You know, they can't ever tell the truth. They'll come up with these creative, what is this, Antifa cows? Wearing masks? These poor things. They mask kids, try to mask toddlers. Now they want to mask the poor cows. Make them look like Antifa Foot Clan ninjas, but they're cows. And they got to put a fan in them and everything. I mean, this is so costly. This sounds like something that, you know, giant corporations with government subsidies would be able to maybe do and then offset the cost to you to make you pay more for this thing. Rather than, why not just go back to common sense? Agriculture, I'll give you an example of that. Acorn Bluff Farm shared a little note about our friend Joel Salatin, who is a regenerative farmer in Virginia. He's got a small farm, and it's very, very successful, and it's legendary around the world. And we've had him on for various episodes of this program, as you may know if you're a regular listener. If not, check out Joel Salatin in the search engine of aneighborschoice.com, where you can see his appearances. I consider him a friend and a role model for how we could get out of the food shortages and food skyrocketing costs connected to disruptions in our global supply chain model of corporate agriculture. Our monocrop agriculture and our industrial animal business is heavily dependent on these big chemical products, these fertilizers, these big things that get highly volatile when there's supply chain disruptions like wars, sanctions, and weaponization of currency. And so Joel Salatin's method uses regenerative practices that bypasses the need to have access to these big chemical products, because it uses the ground, it uses the local ecosystem, and it uses the biome that you build back better into the ground by allowing animals to be rotated in a kind of holistic rotational pattern. He does this because he's a Christian and he loves liberty and he loves to take care of the earth. He's not a liberal. He doesn't use coercion to do it. He's doing it the right way. But Acorn Bluff says Saladin uses regenerative farming. He's returning more to the land than he puts into it. Productivity. Saladin wanted to produce more animals and vegetables and more per acre simultaneously. What this means practically is rotating animals to simulate ancient grazing patterns, moving animals in sequence to create symbiotic grazing, designing structures that meet animal psychology. And his farm, Polyface, does this and more. And Acorn Bluff Farms is the first I've heard of them, but they're imitating him. And he has been a great role model for so many people. But the reason why the establishment like the Bidens and the Prince Charles of the world and so forth won't promote it is because that disrupts the consolidated oligarchic cartel model of fake markets that they like. So it's a brilliant solution. It puts more, it captures more carbon emissions than it releases. So if I'm telling you, doing Joel Salatin's method, if you could live and eat at a local farm, get most of your stuff from farms like that, that's the least amount of carbon and pollution that you can do in terms of a diet. Way beyond. It's way more healthier for the environment than vegetarian or vegan-based diets, which are using, you're getting mangoes from Chile, because people want these fruits around the year. They want certain vegetables around the year. It's not natural to their natural local environment to have all these different crops around the year all the time available. That's a globalist-based diet. Global corporatist-based diet. Monocrop diet. So the monocrops, these vast fields and different kill millions and displace millions of animals and destroy the sand and soil of all kinds of environments around the world. Displacing forests, destroying animals, wildlife habitats. And then when they are tilling and harvesting and so forth and so on, and spraying, they're killing more animals in these monocrop vegetarian-based foods. And then when they're going off and again, sourcing these foods, getting your grapes from, across the country from California, if you live here in Florida, or getting your oranges from Spain and all this stuff. That's fuel. All that is middle people in the way making a little piece of money, and you're getting a fruit or a product picked before it's time. So it has to be gassed or so forth to get to the level of being slightly edible. It's grown in soil that's depleted of nutrition, so you don't get hardly any of the minerals and vitamins that you would if it was raised the way Joel does. But why doesn't Prince Charles and Biden, why aren't they promoting that right now? Because they can't. They offer fake solutions and pretend to act like they're humanitarians doing it. It's a total con game. They make you put confidence. Oh, look, all I have to do is go along with their gimmicks, surrender more of my liberties, surrender more of my wealth, and do these gimmicks like put Antifa masks on cows' faces. And then pay $60 a pound for low-quality meat if I'm lucky. Most likely, they'd rather you eat seed oil sludge fake meat burgers or cricket meal. But that kind of dumb approach just doesn't get the job done. So we have to go outside of politics, and we have to be like a Joel Salatin and build the solutions that actually work, that actually help the environment, that actually give you nutritious food, that actually are not dependent on global market. choice. Is back. I'm your host, David Gornoski. So glad to have this time with you again as we roll up our sleeves together and work neighbor to neighbor to solve problems in our community with positivity, with a hopeful attitude, guiding what we do. I saw this story. Whatfinger.com said former Obama advisor whines about Bongino and Shapiro being too popular. Apparently, on MSNBC, they're mad and upset that Shapiro show Daily Wire has more people watching it on Facebook by a lot than CNN or MSNBC or any of the other state-approved media outlets. I'm telling you, because we don't have any objective truth, people are desperate to try to set themselves up as the divine authority, as if, we have a right to be bigger and more popular. And so when somebody who's unauthorized, who has unauthorized opinions, even if they're not that different or radically different, but if you have a very insecure worldview, then even just one deviation from the preferred dogma is a great heresy. And it can't be tolerated. If your worldview needs a coercive monopoly to maintain its power, it is extremely weak and fragile. It be defeated. It will be defeated. And that's just the way it's going to work. That's why it's ridiculous that, let me give you an example. Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade says we are going to impose a top-down solution for 330 million people with various different cultures and traditions all across this land, artificially, even though matters related to life and what to do with questions of life and all that should be dealt at state law or local level. Roe v. Wade made up fiction and created a one-size-fits-all imposition that has done nothing but inflame and create tensions and disarray in the community. And the conservative defeat of it, potentially, that's coming up, possibly, doesn't impose the other way and says ban for all 330 million. It says, no, it goes back to the states for them to decide what they want to do. Choices. Same thing with Twitter. What's considered to be a win for conservatives is simply saying, hey, we're not completely rig the game for the establishment, giant big business approved perspectives. We're going to just allow people to be on an open, free playing field to debate and talk and dialogue. And that's considered a great loss for the left. It's not, Elon Musk proposing to make it his vision. He's not saying, I'm going to flip it and I'm going to censor the establishment voices and throttle them and shadow ban them and make them hard to get followers or be exposed on other people's timeline or whatever the Twitter thing, feed, I guess is what they call it. He's not doing that. He's just saying, hey, I'm not going to use power the same way the establishment does. And that's considered an egregious attack on the establishment. That means the establishment's ideas are very, very, very weak, very fragile. They're a mile wide and a nanometer deep in terms of their deep, persuasive, long-term trust that people have in them. And as I've said, we see Hispanics are trending more conservative. They're rejecting the woke stuff. They're rejecting open borders. They're rejecting attacks on the family. And if the Hispanic community continues, not just the Florida Hispanic community, but Texas and these other communities continue to move in a more liberty direction, you watch, that border will be sealed in a heartbeat. And that wall will be built very fast. And just like Ron Paul warned, maybe it'll be used to keep us in if things get a little bit too ugly. As we can see, the government doesn't have the stomach to allow for an economic cleansing of the system. It'll kick the can down the road until there's an absolute dollar crisis, and an absolute dollar crisis means a catastrophic global crisis, which is why the world continues to prop up the dollar. As Peter Schiff has suggested, America's government is like a drunk, and everybody keeps paying the tab, and the entire economy of the world depends on people paying the drunk's tab as he drinks and drinks and drinks. But at some point, the gig will be up. You won't be able to keep doing it. And rather than allow the pain of economic contraction out establishment's wealth, as well as everybody else's wealth, the Great Reset is about consolidating market power for the establishment with various gimmicks and scams, so that when the dollar crisis happens, their wealth and their interests will be protected and actually enhanced by the economic downturn. That's what the Great Reset is all about. It's about creating another narrative that would justify you voluntarily allowing the establishment to consolidate their profits for their friends, for their industries, for their lobbying interests, and you will think it's your own salvation in the process. If we allowed a true market correction to happen, a lot of these scam corporations that are ineffective and inefficient and garbage and low quality would be wiped out. And a lot of the establishment's wealth would be wiped out as well. So they can't have that. That's why they demonize competition to their system, like Bitcoin. That's why they demonize gold and silver, right? That's why they demonize local food movement, right? If you get your food outside of their financial system dependent industrial food system, welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. I'm your host, David Gornoski. I hope you're doing well. You can join in at 727-587-1040. That's 727-587-1040 to be a part of the program. The problem that I have with so much of what comes out of D.C. is its kind of trashy mindset. They just don't seem to have any respect for the assets, so to speak, that they're supposed to be in charge, according to them, of managing. Things like our culture, our cohesion, our property, our money, our health. They run them into the ground. They're like renters from hell. You know, you hear about these horror stories of renters that because they don't own the home and they don't respect or care about anybody else's stuff, they just make an absolute hell mess out of something, totally run the property into the ground, destroy the walls, destroy the carpet, destroy the appliances, the backyard, just absolute nasty mess. Because they don't care. It's not theirs. They're going to run it into the ground because they don't care about the long-term value of what they're having at the moment. And that mindset is what happens with DC. Yes, there's a permanent bureaucracy, but they get to have their pensions, whether they make an absolute mess of us, the supposed clients that are coerced into using their services. And they get a nice pension whether they do an absolute disaster or not. Look at what they did with that Obama website. Remember the Obamacare website? Goodness. Billions of dollars, and they couldn't even get to work. I mean, it's pathetic. Look what they said. We're here to take care of you. We're telling you, FDA says, OxyContin's perfectly fine. Go ahead and take it. It's not even addictive. We'll even put an insert to add insult to injury. You know? And so it's a shame, but that's the reality of where we're at. So when I look at these different, narratives coming out left and right, I'm reminded of the bigger picture here, right? We have to be able to get a conversation going in the media that transcends the same dialectical, you do this, I do the opposite. We've got to come together to build real cooperation towards nonviolent, productive solutions. We need to get people eating better. We need to get people eating closer to home. And that, in turn, if we do the Joel Salatin method of regenerative agriculture, will actually reduce our pollution impact. It actually will be lower cost in the long run because we won't be dependent on global chemical markets. Supply chain issues. We need to get people away from sick care by learning how food can be thy medicine, as Hippocrates used to say, right? Let food be thy medicine. That mindset needs to permeate the way in which we deal with health choices. And that's not going to be something that happens overnight. It's going to take a lot of people's patience, a lot of people's perseverance, a lot of hard work, a lot of courage to feel different, because we're building kind of like Noah's Arks for the future. People say, you don't need to do that, right? There's no reason to do this. And in a moment, you're going to be treated and ridiculed. You're going to be censored. I mean, look at what I've gone through with our show, just a little bit about what other people go through. They go through much worse in many cases, but our Facebook thing throttled, our YouTube deleted. We're trying Twitter out for the first time, and I can already tell that because I post Steve Kirsch and Robert Malone and Peter McCullough interviews and stuff, they've already got me on the, watch list, so to speak, in terms of channels that are probably, Twitter pages that are probably not going to have the best weight in their algorithms. So those are the realities of living in a fragile, weak hegemony that is just tightening its grip to cover for its weakness. It can't handle dissent. It can't handle deference. That's why, or lack of deference. Lack of fealty. That's why they go nuts when they hear that Tucker Carlson's going to air instead of the January 6th committee, because they're so desperate to say, look, you've got to worship the state the way we do. We are selling you. We are proselytizing you. We are telling you, you've got to see the state the way we see it. You've got to demonize the same people we demonize. You have to talk the way we talk. You have to glorify the behaviors that we glorify. And if you don't, you are going to be in trouble. We are going to turn the herd against you. And so that's what this battle's all about. But it's so easy to get caught up in doing the right-wing thing where you just go and say, you tell me to stand, I'll sit. It's just like you're playing this 1-0, this binary game. It doesn't really get you anywhere. We've got to have a forward vision approach to things. And I'll keep saying it over and over and over and over and over again in different ways because nobody else is saying it. And it's everything, right? This message is everything in terms of you don't have a forward vision to offer, then you're not going to have anything going forward. If you don't have a vision for the future, you're lost in darkness because you don't know where to go. You don't know why you're doing what you're doing. You're just reacting, to insults or whatever that's coming your way. And how much of that is what we see in our political discourse today? We see that all around us. So wouldn't it be great if we could learn to see the humanity in our neighbor even when they are doing dumb, ridiculous groupthink, even when they're caught up in nonsense? But it's hard to do that when you have an establishment that's hell-bent on doing everything it can to inflame rivalry, to inflame suspicion between people, to make people think and feel as a group rather than as an individual. You see these constant attacks coming out of New York City, and I know some of these are selective. I know there's the mean world syndrome, but it just seems like there's so many videos of Asian people being punched and beaten, and you say, why in the world is this happening? Why are they attacking people? And that's the result of the media and the entertainment and the culture of our time saying, don't see your neighbor as a human being. Don't see yourself in your neighbor in an empathetic way. See your neighbor for his external identity markers in relationship to the different external identity markers you have. And then if you don't like them and you want to compete or you're better in the moment or to bully them, then you have the right to do so because you're not thinking for individual responsibility for what you're doing. You're thinking about what, your group has to do in order to, distinguish itself from another group. And all of this is a result of DC having this kind of trashy, they all hate each other as neighbors because they're running everything into the ground. And the more that DC runs things into the ground, people feel like they're crabs in a bucket, desperate to, climb out, even if it means pulling the other crab down to get that way. And that's not going to help anybody. Pulling each other down in a bucket where we're all going to be boiled alive as crabs or something, that's not going to help anybody. But in the moment, when that's your only perspective, you're just seeing as a group and you're just pulling other people down, saying, you know what, I'm going to pull you down. Why? Because DC's running America into the ground like renters from hell who don't care about the long-term value of that which they're supposed to be stewarding. We need to have a big picture view. We need to have skin in the game, folks. We'll take a break and return after this news break. going to try to make a big deal out of the January 6th thing. They really want to milk that and the gun shooting events to try to turn the page on the disaster that's taking place, harming so many people. We can't afford our gas. We can't afford to get to work. We can't afford to get groceries that are essential. And our government has such a rigged economy, they subsidize all the junk food, all the garbage, seed oil-ridden food that poisons our cells, breaks down our mitochondria, which are energy batteries, makes us constantly fatigued, constantly in a state of inflammation and metabolic dysfunction. We become a nation of low-energy Jebs, as they would say in the MAGA world, right? Trump world. Low-energy people. Physically, literally, mentally. Mental fog. But we can't afford the good food because they've rigged the good food stuff to, like, what is it? How many beef suppliers? 5? That's so dumb. How is that a market? That's not a market. That's a rigged market. So people can't afford to get food. And then you get a few local producers, but the scale is such that they can't really, they don't have, a lot of times the costs are higher than they should be because they don't have limited scale. But the more you have people doing it, the more prices would drop for local food production direct from the farmers. But the government makes it very difficult for farmers to sell food directly. That's why we need food freedom. But again, government makes your food that's poisoning you very cheap. And the food that's healthy for you and healthy for the environment and safe from global supply chain disruptions like we're experiencing with the Great Reset, it becomes so unaffordable. You can't afford it. It's out of the range for most people. But you're not going to hear people in the TV party tell you that. Court jesters like Colbert are going to tell you, buy a Tesla, Eat vegan plant burgers. Stay in the house and watch Netflix 24/7. And that doesn't help anybody. That's just dismissing people's real pain and suffering. And then changing the subject. If they all they were going to do is report facts on the January 6th, why do they need a TV producer to produce it? I can't even believe it, Thought they would hide that kind of a thing. They're just out and out embracing the theatrics. But the people don't really buy it. They put so much time and energy and they get such little return out of it. There is a hardcore, totally brainwashed group of low-info people who buy their BS, but it's a ever-dwindling group. And they are just functioning in a constant, catfish scam relationship to government. Government keeps presenting itself, at least the D.C. establishment keeps presenting itself as their messianic saviors, but they're not. They trot out these Hollywood stars. Matthew McConaughey's over there talking, in his little way and trying to be all relatable and stuff and trying to be common sense and talking like, hey, guys, come on, man. Let's just come together and let's work this out. And maybe he's well-meaning. That's great. Fine, whatever. But, if he's being used by Biden, I don't think that's a well-meaning policy that he's going to be pushing. Biden has been using gun laws to lock up people for nonviolent crimes and put them away for decades of their life, for over half a century. Is that who Matthew McConaughey wants to embrace that kind of stuff? By the way, very good and well, that none of the proposals that Matthew McConaughey's proposing, red flag laws, which will be abused no matter whether he says they don't let them be abused. They will be abused. What policy does government take that they don't abuse? Oh, we just need to spy to stop 9/11 from happening again. Now they collect everything you do. Phone calls, everything. And they unmask their political opponents who critique war policies. What the heck does that have to do with preventing 9/11? And you want to say, oh, they won't abuse red flag laws. Come, give me a break. They won't abuse a background check policy that's used. I mean, if you liked an Elon Musk tweet, eventually that will be getting you on the, not allowed to buy a gun deal. Okay. Raising the age of, that issue, raising it from 18 to 21 to buy an AR-15, that's not going to do anything to stop somebody from buying these guns on the black market. Has raising the drinking age from 18 to 21 stopped 18-year-olds from getting smashed with alcohol? No. It makes it more exciting to go and try to get a hold of it when they're in that kind of social environment. It makes it more of a hot stove. Oh, you tell me I can't get it? It's edgy now, right? This is dumb stuff. But this is what people who are nanny state moral busybodies feel compelled to do. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they're imposing order on the chaos of a mad society in which the violence of our culture is coming down into the domestic situation. In a little bit, I'm going to get to a new article at aneighborschoice.com that I recommend you take a look, that will explore this a little bit. And we'll pull from that article about how our government acts as role models that people are imitating to disastrous results. But presenting all these new figures, look, I got Matthew McConaughey. And I'm sure he's well-meaning, whatever. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. But these things would do nothing but divide, and they won't do anything but be used to harm people. I mean, these people are literally saying George W. Bush and Joe Biden are literally trying to associate the MAGA Trump movement as worse than the 9/11 terrorists. When the 9/11 anniversary happened, George W. Bush was presented on there, and he said, these new extremists, and they're just blatantly tying anybody who likes a Donald Trump post online as the new 9/11 terror. How egregious. And you want those crazy sociopaths, those opportunistic, these people love guns. You think Bush and Biden hate guns? Without the gun trade, they would have had no political career. They wouldn't even have a job. I mean, George W. Bush and Biden get their job so that they dutifully submit their mouth to whatever the munitions and weapons companies tell them to do for whatever scheme or war they have to do next. They arm Saudi Arabia to the teeth after they've had all this evidence of their connection to terrorism. My goodness. George W. Bush is literally in favor of us, and he was and still is probably in favor of what we did, where we fought hand in hand with Al-Qaeda against Christians in Syria. And you think those people are credible when they tell you, hey, look, we're just trying to save kids' lives. Background checks, raise them. Gun buying age from 18 to 21. Yeah, well, if you're going to do that, then what about kids who are drafted at 18 to go put a gun in their hand and go off to war? You're not going to change that, are you? Right? Thomas Massey recently said that in a hearing in Congress with Nadler. Nadler didn't know what to say because that's called logic. That's called the truth. And the truth just, boom, cuts through the stupidity. Like a thunderclap, it silences fools. Bam! You just can't defeat the truth when it's just revealed in its true form. And the truth is, These proposed gun laws, whether it's the moderate type rhetoric from Matthew McConaughey types, they're not going to do anything to stop the innocent shedding of blood. Only a cultural repentance of violence in and of itself, and our addiction to coercion, and our addiction to worship the bad role models of power, and turning to the role model of Jesus, only that will create a renaissance and a healing atmosphere in our society. We'll unpack this after this short break. FM and AM and our podcast. Hey, if you're listening on podcast, can you take a moment and do me a favor, write a review, rate it, and share it with whatever social media you prefer? That makes a difference. Every day you do that, more people join us, and we're able to do more and more production. We don't just do this radio show every day with all the world-class guests and all the topics and research and investigations that we provide that empower you and equip you. And people tell me all the time their lives being changed in so many different ways because of information that we share uniquely on this show. Our guests are unique and special and totally impactful for your life benefit. But when you take the time to share this and write a review, that helps us to do more work. We not just do the podcast and the radio show, we also do the website with articles, of one of which I'm going to reference in just a moment. And we also do films. If you go on shows on neighborschoice.com, you'll see a tab called shows at the top, and you'll see things like radio episodes. That includes what you'll hear right now, this live show. Then you'll see Things Hidden, the film series. That's where we do documentary-style conversations, fascinating conversations with people. Prince Ermia Selassie of the Crown Council of Ethiopia, Sir Owen, military analyst and foreign policy expert. We have the Things Hidden podcast. That's the deep dive discussion, our latest episode of which is with Professor Matthias Desmond. Then we have our health and nutrition category, which are online-only discussions of people like Tucker Goodrich and Kate Shanahan and Ray Pete. We also have Science and You. That's our physics segment we do, typically on Thursday. That's compiled for you on demand on our website. And then we have roundtables where we do a mishmash of different people joining us together. You can also, by the way, on our shows tab, see guests. You can see kind of like a hall of fame of some of the best and notable guests that we've had on the show. So all of these different things that we have on our website are supported by people like you contributing to us monetarily, and also with your interactions, with you sharing and rating and reviewing the product. So please do so when you have this moment today. Here's this article on neighborschoice.com by Surya Dasgupta. It says, government is a mass violence machine. This is, starts off with a quote from Dostoevsky's book, The House of the Dead. Tyranny is a habit which may be developed until at last it becomes a disease. I declare that the noblest nature can become so hardened and bestial that nothing distinguishes it from that of a wild animal. Blood and power intoxicate. They help to develop callousness and debauchery. The mind then becomes capable of the most abnormal cruelty, which it regards pleasure. The man and the citizen are swallowed up in the tyrant, and the return to a human dignity, repentance, moral resurrection becomes almost impossible. The recent school shooting incident in Uvalde, Texas, has once again ignited the gun control debate in America. Those on the left, on the one hand, believe that such tragedies can be prevented by stricter gun control laws, while conservatives believe otherwise. What both sides have woefully overlooked is that the state's ultra-violent method of solving problems has an overwhelmingly negative influence on those governed. What place does the government occupy for the governed, especially in terms of getting an actual person to do something for the supposed greater good? The government is not only the provider of law, but it is also a major influencer on the masses from its position on the pulpit. The government is an entity beyond immediate reach. This makes it, in anthropological terms, an external mediator. When an external mediator arises, people are bound to imitate its actions without holding it accountable. The government and its media apparatus, in their effort to control opinions, for example, continue to send a message to society that coercion and violence solves problems. When the state saw a problem in whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange leaking their classified materials, the state began actively persecuting and hunting down both individuals. Assange is now languishing in a British prison. Snowden is hiding in Russia. What message is the government conveying with these actions? During the pandemic, the government saw fit to decree dubious medicines and enforce draconian lockdowns on millions of people, affecting their ability to work for a living and lead healthy social lives. As a result of these lockdowns, depression, domestic abuse, and physical health issues rose to astronomical levels. Doctors who spoke out on these issues were vilified and silenced by corporate monopolies with help from the state. When the government effectively turns an entire nation into a vast prison, what message is it conveying to the masses? When the government sends troops abroad or sends billions of dollars worth of weapons to foreign nations in the hope of escalating wars, what message is it conveying? People like Barack Obama and Joe Biden, who are looking to capitalize on the Texas tragedy, and the same people who have promoted gun violence abroad, and in the process murdered thousands of people in places like Libya, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Iraq. These people have also armed murderous neo-Nazi organizations like the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, the very same Azov that has terrorized the Russian-speaking residents of the Donbass region since 2014. Dehumanization, invasion, and violence, these are the signals that the American government sends out each and every day with its policies. On May 24th, 18-year-old Salvador Rolando Ramos walked into Robb Elementary School with a weapon. He effectively dehumanized, invaded, and shot 22 human beings. So, this imitation pattern here is important because we are such a state-driven society. We worship state power. We are such a politicized society. So much of our society is anchored by the state and its actors and its politicians. And so those are the people who end up becoming the biggest role models in a lot of ways. And then you can say, well, there's Hollywood stars and people like that. But if you notice, the big Hollywood stars, influencers like Kim Kardashian, Matthew McConaughey, they all are on the same script usually with those who are in the biggest power enclaves in politics. So they bend the knee to the political role models. And what do the political role models do? Whenever there's a problem, they use force to subdue it. They escalate wars. They forcibly prevent people from being with their loved ones as they take their last breath. because of hysteria that they're capitalizing on. They use force to shut down about life. They sanction countries and starve people if they don't go along with their preferred corporate interests. What do role models like that end up doing? Other people imitate that. If those are your highest role models in a society and they're using violence and aggression and force to get what they want, kids are going to imitate that and have an aggressive and violent nature. So we don't want to cultivate that kind of role model. We want to cultivate nonviolence, self-giving, washing the feet of those who we want to inspire, those who look up to us. When is the last time have you seen the culture in D.C. show a true spirit of washing the feet of the deplorables they mock and vilify and demonize and smear their faces in the mud and say, you are not worth anything? When have they ever treated those people with love and respect? When Trump tried to humanize him, they've been turning him into a monster ever since. But yes, ultimately, we have got to turn the page on elevating politicians and their coercive ideas as the highest role models of how we should conduct our lives in imitation. Because the bottom line is, we're going to imitate somebody. You're not going to be an island unto yourself. You will be influenced by role models. Let's let it be the master of history himself, Jesus. I'm David Gornoski. Email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.